I'm Elizabeth, 32 female. I live alone in a minimalist house that I designed myself, filling its walls with photographs of buildings that have more soul than the people I grew up with. I'm an architectural photographer, a profession my family tolerates with a condescending smile. They never understood why I wouldn't just take a real job at my father's firm, but they were happy to tell their friends I was the artistic one. My entire life has been a performance of gratitude for a world I never asked for, a world built on the power of our family name. A name I was about to walk away from forever. This is the story of how one careless phone call, a single overheard sentence, gave me the strength to dismantle the gilded cage my family had built around me. They thought I was their dependent, their failure, the one who would never amount to anything. They were about to find out just how much a loser could accomplish when she finally decided to stop playing their game. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Life in the orbit of the Harrison family, my family, was governed by a set of unwritten but rigidly enforced rules. Rule number 1, public image is everything. Rule number 2, family loyalty is absolute, which was really just another way of saying loyalty to my father, George, was absolute. And rule number 3, the one that applied specifically to me, be grateful. I was reminded of this obligation constantly, not with words, but with gestures, with gifts, with the very air I breathed. My life, they implied, was a present they had generously bestowed upon me, and it would be terribly rude not to be thankful for it. My father, George Harrison, was a titan in the city's financial landscape. He was the CEO of Harrison Investments, a firm his own father had started. He was sharp, charismatic in public, and carried an aura of authority that made rooms fall silent. My mother, Emma, was the perfect corporate wife, elegant, socially adept, and fiercely protective of the family's reputation. She chaired charity galas and sat on museum boards, her entire existence a masterclass in performing wealth. Then there was my older brother, Charles. He was the heir, the golden boy, the living embodiment of my father's ambition. He followed the prescribed path without deviation: Ivy League business school, a job at a rival firm for exactly 2 years to prove himself, and then a swift ascent to vice president at Harrison Investments. He was handsome, confident, and utterly devoid of the self-doubt that seemed to plague me. To my parents, Charles was a success story. I was a project. My choice to become an architectural photographer had been a source of quiet, simmering disappointment for them. It wasn't a career path they could boast about at their country club. There were no stock options, no corner offices, no clear ladder to climb. It was art, which in their world was a hobby, not a profession. Still, they played their part. When I decided to build my own home 5 years ago, my father had offered the money for the land and construction as a gift. "Every Harrison needs a proper home base, Elizabeth," he'd said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Consider it an investment in your future." I knew it wasn't just a gift, it was a leash. The house, a stunning piece of modern architecture valued at over $1 million, was in a wealthy suburb just 20 minutes from their sprawling estate. It kept me close, tethered to their world, a beautiful exhibit in their collection of successes. I was the artistic daughter with the lovely home. The fact that I had designed it myself, and that my photography business was actually thriving, landing me features in prestigious magazines, was a footnote they rarely mentioned. My success was my own, but the foundation it was built on, the house, the education, the name, was theirs. And they never let me forget it. My days were a careful balancing act. I'd spend weeks on the road, capturing the stark beauty of a new museum or the quiet dignity of a historic home, feeling free and capable. Then I'd return and the weight of expectation would settle back onto my shoulders. Sunday dinners were mandatory. Family vacations were non-negotiable. My life was partitioned, the vibrant, independent world I had built for myself, and the gilded cage I was expected to return to. My best friend, Martha, was the only one who truly understood. We'd been friends since college, and she was everything my family wasn't: direct, unpretentious, and fiercely loyal to me, not my last name. "They don't see you, Liz," she'd tell me over coffee. They see a reflection of themselves. Your success only matters to them if they can take credit for it. She was a real estate lawyer, a profession that was both impressive and, in her case, a way to help people navigate complicated situations. I never knew how vital her skills would become to me. I tried to believe my family loved me in their own way. I tried to see their control as concern, their judgment as a desire for my security. The house wasn't a leash, it was a safety net. The constant check-ins weren't surveillance, they were just keeping in touch. I made excuses for the subtle barbs, the backhanded compliments, the way my accomplishments were always minimized next to Charles's. "Oh, another magazine feature? That's lovely, dear," my mother would say, before immediately pivoting. "Charles just closed a deal that's going to net the firm 8 figures. We're so proud." I just smile and nod, the familiar sting of inadequacy washing over me. This was the price of admission to the Harrison family. I accepted it because I thought I had to. I accepted it because, deep down, a part of me feared they were right. Maybe I wasn't as strong or capable as Charles. Maybe I did need them. Maybe my life was just a product of their generosity. Gratitude was my rent for living in their world, and for 32 years, I had paid it without question. I told myself it was a small price for a life of comfort and opportunity. I had no idea how high the true cost was, or that the bill was about to come due in the most brutal way imaginable. The day my world fractured started like any other Tuesday. I was in my home office, editing a series of photos I'd taken of a restored lighthouse on the coast. The work was meticulous and calming, each click of the mouse bringing the image into sharper focus, revealing the beauty in the weathered stone and aging iron. My phone rang, displaying my father's name. I sighed, pausing my work. A call from my father during the workday usually meant one of two things: a summons to a last-minute family event or a gentle suggestion about my career. "Hi, Dad," I answered, forcing a cheerful tone. "Everything okay?" "Elizabeth, just the person," he said, his voice booming with its usual easy authority. "Your mother and I are heading to Europe for a month. A little jaunt through Italy and Greece. We're leaving Thursday. Charles is coming over for dinner tomorrow night to see us off, and we expect you to be there. 7 o'clock sharp." It wasn't a question or an invitation, it was a command. "Of course, Dad, I'll be there," I said. "Sounds like a wonderful trip. I'm a little jealous." "As you should be," he chuckled. "We'll bring you back something nice. Now I have Charles on the other line. I need to confirm some details with him about the firm. I'll see you tomorrow." And then I heard the click, or at least I thought I did. It was the faint, tinny sound of a button being pressed on his end, the kind of sound that usually signals the end of a conversation. I was about to put my phone down when I heard his voice again, not talking to me, but to someone else. It was fainter, muffled, as if the phone was now resting on his desk or shoulder instead of at his mouth. He hadn't hung up properly. My first instinct was to hang up myself. It felt intrusive to listen in, but then I heard my name and I froze. Was that Elizabeth? It was my brother, Charles. His voice was clearer now, as if my father had put him on speakerphone. "Yes," my father grumbled. The cheerful, commanding tone he'd used with me was gone, replaced by something weary and dismissive. "Just reminding her of her filial duties." Charles laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was sharp and derisive. "God forbid the great artist misses a family dinner. Does she have any idea how much that house of hers costs us in taxes and upkeep?" "Don't get me started," my father shot back, and my stomach twisted into a knot. "Your mother keeps saying it's a good investment in the family's portfolio, but I know what it is. It's a monument to mediocrity." Each word was a physical blow. I sank into my chair, my hand gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I felt my breath catch in my chest, my ears ringing. This was my father. This was my brother, talking about me. "She'll never amount to anything, Charles, you know that," my father continued, his voice laced with a strange mix of resignation and contempt. "She's just a loser living off our name, taking pictures of buildings. It's a joke. Thank God I have you to take over the firm. At least one of my children is a success." A beat of silence, and then came the words that shattered the last vestiges of my denial. Charles replied, his tone dripping with amusement, "Well, someone has to pay for her little hobbies." "Don't worry, Dad. I'll make sure her allowance is always taken care of when I'm in charge." And then they both laughed. It was a shared, knowing laugh, the sound of two people confirming a truth they had both long accepted. To them, I was not a daughter or a sister. I was a financial burden, a failure, a charity case. The phone line went dead. This time for real. I sat there in the silent office, the echo of their laughter still ringing in my ears. The beautiful, light-filled space I had designed and cherished suddenly felt like a prison. The photos on my screen, images I had been so proud of just minutes before, seemed frivolous and pathetic. A monument to mediocrity, a loser living off our name. The words replayed in my head, a vicious, looping soundtrack to my life. Every gift, every act of generosity, every bit of support was suddenly recontextualized. It wasn't love or concern, it was a transaction. They were propping me up to maintain the family image, all while privately mocking my inability to stand on my own. The worst part was the profound, soul-crushing shame. A dark part of my mind whispered that they were right. Had I been fooling myself all this time? Was my independence a complete illusion? Was I just a child playing at being a successful adult, funded by a father who saw me as a joke? Tears welled in my eyes, hot and angry. But underneath the hurt, something else was stirring, a cold, hard kernel of rage. It was a feeling I had suppressed for years, a fury I had always redirected inward as self-doubt. But now it had a target. They had underestimated me my entire life. They saw me as weak, dependent, and insignificant. They thought I would just continue to smile and say thank you, content in my gilded cage. They had made a fatal mistake. They forgot to hang up the phone, and in doing so, they had just handed me the key to my own freedom. The performance was over. The hours after that phone call were a blur of cold, quiet fury. I didn't cry anymore. The hurt had crystallized into something sharp and clear. Resolve. I walked through my beautiful, sunlit house, a home I had poured my heart into, and saw it for what it had become, a symbol of their deception. Every high-end finish, every custom-built shelf, every floor-to-ceiling window felt like a testament not to my success, but to their condescension. A monument to mediocrity. The words were etched into my mind. I canceled my appointments for the rest of the week, citing a sudden personal matter. I couldn't face clients. I couldn't pretend to care about the clean lines of a building when the very foundation of my life had just crumbled. My first instinct was to confront them. To storm into that farewell dinner the next night, play a recording of the call. I had instinctively hit record on my phone screen midway through their conversation and watched their faces as their hypocrisy was laid bare. But what would that accomplish? They would deny it. They would gaslight me, call me hysterical, and accuse me of eavesdropping. They would twist it until I was the one in the wrong, the ungrateful daughter who had violated their privacy. They had spent a lifetime mastering this exact kind of psychological warfare. A direct confrontation would be a battle on their home turf, and I would lose. No, an explosion wouldn't work. I needed something quieter, colder, and far more permanent. I needed to dismantle my life as they knew it, piece by piece, until there was nothing left for them to control or belittle. The first person I called was Martha. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Liz, what's up?" I couldn't form the words at first. A choked sob escaped my lips, and she immediately shifted into high alert. "Liz, are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm home," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "Can you come over? Something happened." She was at my door in 20 minutes, a worried look on her face. I let her in, and without a word, I played the recording for her. She listened, her expression hardening from concern to disbelief, and finally to pure, unadulterated rage on my behalf. When it finished, she didn't offer platitudes or comforting hugs. She just looked at me, her eyes blazing. "Okay," she said, her voice low and steady. "So, what are we going to do about these people?" The word "we" was the first anchor I'd had all day. It grounded me, reminded me that I wasn't entirely alone. "I want out, Martha," I said, the words feeling heavy and real as I spoke them. "Completely out. I want to disappear from their lives so thoroughly that they have nothing left to point to, nothing left to mock, and nothing left to control." Martha nodded slowly, her legal mind already turning. "Disappearing is one thing. Doing it in a way that protects you and cuts every tie is another. They have financial leverage over you, starting with this house. She was right. The gift of the house was my biggest vulnerability. My father had paid for it, but the deed was in my name, or so I thought. Let's start there, Martha said, pulling her laptop from her bag. I'm going to look up the property records for this address right now. I want to see exactly how the title is held. We sat in silence as she typed, the sound of the keys filling the cavernous living room. I watched her face, praying she wouldn't find what we both suspect. See, Ted? After a few minutes, her jaw tightened. She turned the screen towards me. They're clever, she said grimly. The deed is in your name, but your father is listed as a lienholder. He placed a private mortgage on the property for the full value of the construction costs, secured against the house itself. My blood ran cold. What does that mean? It means that if you sell the house, he gets paid back first from the proceeds. It also means he could, in theory, foreclose on you if you violated some term he buried in the agreement. It wasn't a gift, Liz. It was a loan with invisible strings. He gave you the illusion of ownership, but he holds all the power. Of course he did. It was his signature move, an act of supposed generosity that was, in reality, a finely crafted mechanism of control. It ensured I could never truly be free without his permission. For years, I had believed the house was mine. Now I knew it was just another part of the cage. So I can't just sell it and walk away? I asked, a wave of despair washing over me. Not and keep the money, Martha confirmed. But the lien is the only thing tying you to him financially on this property. You've been paying the taxes, the insurance, the upkeep. You have equity, especially since the market value has gone up since it was built. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. There might be a way, but it has to be fast and it has to be quiet. They're leaving for Europe in 2 days. That gives us a window, a very small one. A plan began to form in the chaos of my mind, vague at first, then gaining shape and substance. It was audacious, terrifying, and felt utterly, undeniably right. They thought I was a loser, a dependent who couldn't survive without them. I was about to show them how resourceful their little failure could be. Martha, I said, my voice steady for the first time since the call. How quickly can you help me sell a house? She looked from the damning property record on her screen to the new, steely look in my eyes. A slow smile spread across her face. For you, Liz, let's find out. Let's burn it all down. The cracks in the foundation of my life had been exposed. Now it was time to bring the whole structure crashing down. The farewell dinner was the hardest performance of my life. I walked into my parents' opulent home, the air thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume, and greeted them with the same practiced smile I had worn for years. My father, George, wrapped me in a brief, stiff hug, smelling of scotch and self-satisfaction. My mother, Emma, kissed the air beside my cheek and complimented my dress, her eyes scanning me for any imperfections. And Charles, my brother, gave me a friendly pat on the back, the same hand that would one day control my allowance. Their laughter, the same laughter I'd heard on the phone, echoed in my memory. I had to physically clench my jaw to keep from flinching. Every word they said was filtered through my new understanding. When my father toasted to family, I saw a CEO toasting his assets. When my mother spoke of their upcoming trip, I heard a woman escaping the mild inconvenience of her children's existence. When Charles joked about holding down the fort, I saw a prince eager for the king to abdicate. They asked about my work, and I gave them the usual vague, pleasant answers, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I was a ghost at my own family dinner, observing them from a great distance, seeing them for the first time as they truly were, strangers who shared my blood but not my heart. The next morning, the real work began. Martha and I met at a small, anonymous coffee shop downtown, our table covered in documents. Okay, phase 1 is speed, Martha said, pushing a folder toward me. I have a list of cash buyers and real estate investment groups who specialize in fast, off-market sales. The price will be slightly lower than market value, but it will be quick and discreet. No for sale, sign on the lawn, no public listings. How much lower? I asked. Maybe 5 to 7%. On a house like yours, that's a significant number, but in exchange, you get a closing in weeks, not months. They'll pay in cash, which bypasses all the typical mortgage underwriting delays. I did the math in my head. It was a price I was more than willing to pay for my freedom. Do it, I said without hesitation. Martha nodded, already texting on her phone. I've already put out feelers with two of the most aggressive buyers. I told them we have a highly motivated seller looking for an all-cash, as is offer with a 10-day closing. Her professionalism was my shield, allowing me to focus on the next, more complicated step, untangling the rest of my life from my family. While Martha handled the house, I started following the money trail. My father had insisted on using his personal wealth manager to guide my investments years ago. A man named Mr. Abernathy, who always treated me with a kindly, paternalistic air. I had a portfolio of stocks and bonds that I rarely looked at, trusting that it was being handled responsibly. Now, I saw that trust for what it was, willful ignorance. I logged into my investment account, my hands shaking slightly. I expected to find more strings, more accounts that were jointly held or controlled by my father. To my surprise, the portfolio was entirely in my name. It was substantial, a mix of blue-chip stocks and mutual funds. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this, at least, was truly mine. But then I noticed something odd. The account had been set up as a trust, with me as the beneficiary. The trustee? My father. I called Martha immediately. "What does it mean if he's the trustee of my investment account?" I asked, pacing my office. "It means he has administrative control," she explained, her voice tight. "He can't withdraw the money for himself, that would be illegal, but he can make investment decisions, and more importantly, he can lock you out. He likely gets duplicate statements. He knows exactly what's in there and what it's doing. If you try to liquidate it, an alert will go straight to him." Another cage, this one made of digital paper. I felt a surge of frustration. He had built a fortress around me, with financial walls so high I couldn't see over them, but every fortress has a weakness. "Is there any way to change the trustee?" I asked. "It's complicated," Martha said. "You'd have to petition the court, prove he's not acting in your best interest. It would be a long, messy fight, and he'd know about it from day one." Time was not on my side. They would be in Europe for a month. I had to be gone before they returned. The house sale would give me a significant amount of cash, but liquidating my portfolio would give me true, untraceable freedom. I spent the next 2 days poring over the trust documents, legal jargon swimming before my eyes. Late on the second night, fueled by coffee and sheer desperation, I found it. A single clause buried deep in the fine print. It stated that the beneficiary could assume the role of trustee if the current trustee became incapacitated or otherwise unreachable for a period of more than 14 consecutive days. 14 days. My parents would be gone for 30. They would be on cruises in remote Italian villages, moving between hotels. They would be, for all intents and purposes, unreachable. It was a standard boilerplate clause, probably one my father's lawyers had included without a second thought, never imagining it would be used against him. But I could use it. With the right documentation, flight itineraries, hotel reservations showing them out of the country, and a sworn affidavit, I could petition the investment firm to grant me control. It was a long shot, a gamble on corporate bureaucracy and the unlikelihood of anyone questioning a request that was, technically, by the book. This was my path. The house sale would be my escape fund. Taking control of the trust would be my declaration of independence. They had built my cage with money, and I would use that same money to tear it down. I looked at the picture on my desk, one of my parents and Charles, all of them smiling their perfect, practiced smiles at some gala. "You think I'm a loser," I whispered to the photograph. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." The 10 days that followed were a masterclass in controlled chaos. My parents and Charles left for Europe on a Thursday, their social media feeds immediately filling with photos of champagne glasses in a first-class airport lounge. The moment they were in the air, my plan kicked into high gear. Martha had worked miracles. She'd found an investment firm that saw my house not as a home, but as a prime piece of real estate in a rapidly appreciating neighborhood. They made an all-cash offer that was just 4% below my asking price, and they agreed to a 10-day close. The lien my father held was a complication, but not a deal-breaker. The title company would cut a check directly to him for the amount of the lien from the sale proceeds, and the rest would be wired to an account of my choosing. An account I had already set up at a new bank, under my name and my name alone. While the sale was in escrow, I began the systematic erasure of Elizabeth Harrison. I went through every drawer, every closet, every box in my house. I separated my life into 3 piles. The first was the keep pile, my camera equipment, my hard drives full of my work, a few sentimental items that held memories untainted by my family, and enough clothes to start a new life. This pile was surprisingly small. The second was the sell pile, designer furniture, expensive art I'd never really liked, and jewelry my parents had given me over the years, gifts that I now understood were just gilded tokens of control. I found a reputable consignment store for the furniture and art, and a private jeweler who paid fair prices for the rest. It was all sold discreetly, for cash. The third pile was the largest, the donate pile. Books, kitchenware, linens, decor, anything that wasn't valuable enough to sell but too useful to trash. I scheduled multiple pickups from a local charity, stripping my home bare until it was just an empty, echoing shell. Each item I let go of felt like shedding a layer of a life that was never truly mine. It was exhausting, emotional, but also incredibly liberating. Simultaneously, I was executing the second part of my plan, seizing control of my trust. I drafted a formal letter to the investment firm, citing the clause in the trust agreement. I attached copies of my parents' publicly posted travel itinerary, a sworn affidavit stating I was unable to reach the trustee, George Harrison, for critical and time-sensitive financial decisions, and the necessary legal forms Martha had prepared. I didn't lie. I simply framed the truth to my advantage. They were, in fact, unreachable for day-to-day decisions. I sent the package via certified mail, a ticking clock starting the moment it was signed for. I spent my days packing and selling, and my nights on the phone with moving companies and storage facilities. I found a long-distance moving company that could transport my small, keep pile to a secure, climate-controlled storage unit in a city thousands of miles away, a city I had picked at random, where I knew no one. The delivery would be made under a new company name I had registered, an LLC for my photography business, creating another layer of separation. I was building a new identity while dismantling the old one. The hardest part was saying goodbye to Martha. She was my only link to the life I was leaving behind, and the thought of cutting that tie was agonizing. We met for one last dinner at our favorite cheap Thai restaurant, a world away from the fine dining establishments my parents frequented. "Are you sure about this, Liz?" she asked, her voice soft. "You don't have to cut everyone out. You don't have to cut me out." "I'm not cutting you out," I promised, my eyes welling up. "I'm just going dark. I need time to figure out who I am without the Harrison name hanging over my head. Once I'm settled, once I'm safe, I will LLU, I promise." She squeezed my hand across the table. "Just be careful. Your father is a powerful man. When he finds out what you've done, he's going to be furious." "I know," I said. "But for the first time in my life, I'm not scared of his anger. What's he going to do? Take away the house I just sold? Freeze the assets I now control?" On the 9th day, 2 crucial emails arrived. The first was from the title company. The sale of the house had officially closed. A substantial 6-figure sum, my share after paying off my father's lien, was now sitting in my new, unmonitored bank account. The second email was from the investment firm. After reviewing my documentation, they had approved my request. Effective immediately, I was granted full control as the sole trustee of my portfolio. I didn't hesitate. I logged in and initiated a complete liquidation of my assets. It would take a few days for the trades to settle, but by the time my family's plane touched down on American soil, the money would be gone, wired to another new account at a different bank. The final day was a whirlwind. The movers came early in the morning and cleared out the last of my belongings. By noon, the house was completely empty. It was vast and silent, my footsteps echoing on the bare floors. I walked through the rooms one last time, no longer seeing a prison, but a vessel that had carried me to this moment. It was just a building, and it no longer had any power over me. Before I left, I did one last thing. I sat down at the cold, marble kitchen island, the only piece of furniture left, and took out a single sheet of expensive stationery I had saved. With a black pen in my neatest handwriting, I wrote just 5 words. I folded the note, propped it up in the center of the island, and walked out the front door, leaving the key on the counter. I didn't look back. I got in my car, which was already packed with a single suitcase, and started driving. I had no destination, only a direction: away. The great disappearance of Elizabeth Harrison was complete. All that was left was for my family to come home and discover the ghost they had created. For 30 days, George, Emma, and Charles Harrison lived in a blissful bubble of luxury. Their trip through Europe was a meticulously curated experience, moving from five-star hotels in Rome to private yacht excursions in the Greek Isles. They posted photos of ancient ruins, gourmet meals, and sun-drenched coastlines. Their captions were full of cheerful updates for their social circle, painting a picture of a perfect, carefree family enjoying the fruits of their labor. They called Elizabeth's phone a few times, leaving cheerful, slightly condescending voicemails. "Just saw the most charming little art gallery in Florence, darling. Made me think of you. Hope you're behaving yourself," Emma had chirped in one message. George left a gruff, "Everything fine at the house? Let me know if you need anything." None of them noticed that she never called back. They were too absorbed in their own world to register her silence as anything other than her usual quiet, slightly distant nature. On the long flight home, they were in high spirits, laughing and joking. George was pleased with the reports he'd received from the firm. Charles was feeling confident and ready to take on more responsibility. Emma was already planning the dinner party, where she would regale her friends with tales of their travels. Charles turned to his father as the plane began its descent. "So, are we still going with the plan to convince Liz to sell that money pit of a house? We could develop that land, put up a couple of spec homes, make a real return on your investment." George sipped his champagne and smirked. "Patience, son. We'll let her play photographer for another year or two. When she inevitably gets bored or runs out of money, she'll come to us. She always does." They landed, breezed through customs, and were met by their driver. The conversation on the way home was light, filled with plans for the coming weeks. As they pulled into the long, winding driveway of their estate, George decided on a whim. "James," he said to the driver, "take us past Elizabeth's place. I want to make sure she hasn't let the landscaping go to ruin while we were away." The car turned down the familiar tree-lined street. As they approached Elizabeth's house, Emma was the first to notice something was off. "That's strange," she said, squinting. "All the curtains are gone. You can see right through the house." George leaned forward. She was right. The house had a vacant, hollow look to it. The manicured lawn was pristine, but the home itself looked empty. "Probably just having them cleaned," he grumbled, though a flicker of unease sparked in his chest. "Driver, pull into the driveway." The car rolled to a stop. George got out, followed by Charles and Emma, their luggage forgotten for the moment. He walked up the stone pathway to the front door and let his spare key from his keychain, a key Elizabeth didn't know he had. He inserted it into the lock and turned. Nothing happened. The key wouldn't turn. "What the devil?" he muttered, jiggling the key. "She's changed the locks." Charles stepped forward and peered through the large glass panel next to the door. His eyes widened. "Dad, there's nothing in there. It's empty, completely empty." Emma rushed to his side, her hand flying to her mouth. "What? That's impossible. Where is all her furniture? Where is Elizabeth?" Panic began to set in. George's face hardened. He rattled the doorknob, then pounded on the heavy oak door, the sound echoing unnaturally. "Elizabeth. Open this door, Elizabeth." Only silence answered. His anger rising, he walked around the side of the house, looking for another way in. He found a back window slightly ajar. With a grunt, he forced it open and hoisted himself inside, dropping to the floor of the empty kitchen. The silence was absolute. The house was a pristine, barren shell. Footsteps echoing, he walked through the vacant living room, the empty dining room, and up the stairs to the bedrooms. Her closet was bare. The bathrooms were scrubbed clean. There was not a single trace of his daughter to be found. Charles and Emma, having found another unlocked window, followed him in, their faces masks of confusion and growing dread. "Where is she?" Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "Did something happen to her? Was she robbed?" "No," George said, his voice dangerously low. He had just spotted it. On the vast, gleaming expanse of the marble kitchen island, there was a single, folded sheet of white paper. He strode over to it and snatched it up. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the 5 simple, elegant words written in his daughter's hand. He read them once, then twice, his face draining of color. The blood drained from his face as a cold, terrifying understanding washed over him. He had been outmaneuvered. Charles came to his side. "What is it, Dad? What does it say?" George's hand trembled as he held out the note. Charles and Emma leaned in to read the message. The note on the marble counter said, "The family loser did this." For a long moment, nobody spoke. The words hung in the empty space, an indictment and a declaration all in one. The quiet, compliant daughter, the artistic failure they had so casually dismissed, had vanished. And in her place, she had left a gaping hole, an empty $1 million house, and a message that cut deeper than any shouted accusation ever could. The laughter from the airplane felt like a distant memory from another lifetime. Their homecoming was not a celebration. It was a reckoning. The fallout was exactly as chaotic and satisfying as I had imagined. My father, George, reacted with explosive fury. Martha, who was keeping tabs for me through mutual acquaintances and public records, gave me a full report. He hired private investigators. He called every friend of mine he could think of. He tried to report me as a missing person, but the police informed him that a 32-year-old woman with no signs of foul play had every right to disappear if she wished. When he discovered that the house had been sold, he nearly had an aneurysm. The fact that his lien had been paid off in full, a perfectly legal and final transaction, left him with no recourse. The money was gone, transferred to an account he couldn't trace. He was a man accustomed to absolute control, and I had stripped him of it entirely. The story he and my mother spun for their social circle was a masterpiece of damage control. They claimed I had suffered some sort of mental breakdown, that I was a troubled soul who had impulsively run away. They framed it as a family tragedy, casting themselves as the worried, heartbroken parents. It was a desperate attempt to salvage their reputation, to paint me as the unstable one rather than admit the truth. I had left them. Charles, Martha told me, was a different story. His anger was mixed with a grudging, terrified respect. I had done something he'd never thought possible. I had beaten his father at his own game. My actions had introduced a level of unpredictability into his perfectly ordered world, and it unnerved him. He was the one who eventually discovered that I had taken control of my trust and liquidated it. The investment firm, bound by privacy laws, would only confirm that the change of trustee had been done legally and that the account was now closed. For my father, this was the ultimate betrayal. It wasn't about the money, it was about the audacity. I had used his own legal framework, the very tools he'd put in place to control me, to break free. I had turned the bars of my cage into a key. While they were scrambling, I was starting over. I settled in a quiet, beautiful city in the Pacific Northwest, a place where the Harrison name meant nothing. I bought a small, unassuming loft apartment in a converted warehouse with cash. It had high ceilings, huge windows, and beautiful old brick, a photographer's dream. It wasn't as grand as my old house, but it was mine in a way that house had never been. Every brick, every beam, every square inch belonged to me and me alone. I continued my work, but under a new professional name, my LLC. Without the pressure of my family's judgment, my creativity flourished. I took on projects that excited me, not ones that would look impressive in a portfolio. I traveled not to five-star resorts but to remote landscapes, capturing the raw, honest beauty of the world. For the first time, my life felt authentic. There was no performance, no mask to wear. It was just me. About 6 months after I left, I sent a single, untraceable email to Martha. It contained only a new, secure phone number and the words, "I'm okay, call me." The relief in her voice when she did was palpable. We spoke for hours, and I finally told her the whole story from my side. She became my one remaining link to the past, a trusted friend who kept me updated on the slow implosion of the Harrison family myth. They never found me. The private investigators hit dead ends everywhere. I had created a clean break, a new life built on a foundation of my own making. The money from the house sale and my trust gave me a security blanket, but I was determined to live off the income from my own work. The money was a tool for freedom, not a crutch. I often think about that phone call, the careless, cruel words that set me free. My father and brother had no idea that in their moment of shared arrogance, they were giving me the greatest gift of my life: the truth. They showed me my reflection in their eyes, and I hated what I saw, not because I believed I was a loser, but because I saw how long I had allowed them to make me feel like one. My revenge wasn't in the empty house or the missing money. That was just the mechanism of my escape. My real revenge is in my quiet, happy, ordinary life. It's in the morning coffee I drink while looking out at a city that doesn't know my old name. It's in the pride I feel when I see my work published under my new one. It's in the peace I feel knowing that my worth is not determined by a stock portfolio or a family legacy, but by my own character and my own creations. I am no longer a Harrison. I am not defined by their wealth or their expectations. I am Elizabeth, a photographer, a woman who built her own future, one photograph at a time. And this life, the one I chose and the one I own, is something they can never touch.